Right, welcome everybody. Come on in. How is everybody doing? We are so excited to have you join us today for this virtual launch. Come on in, share, tag, invite your people to come on in and to be a part of this special event. Good morning. Happy Friday. We are so excited that you are joining in with us this morning. Wherever you are, come on in. Come on in. We are ready to get the launch started. We are so excited. The weather is nice and bright. And so we want you to come on in. Please type your name, where you from, your organization or business affiliation. We are looking forward to seeing you and hearing from you today. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to jot it down, as our moderators will be reading them and asking them on today.
I have someone saying that they can't. All right, I see Eric from the Quintessential Gentleman. Someone else just said they can't see any of us.
Okay.
Let me see.
I would check the speaker, the view of the screen, and make sure that it's up there.
All right.
Can't see anyone.
I'm gonna message him and see. All right, we have Deidre Helberg from the U.S. Coalition of Black Women Businesses.
Good morning, Deidre. I see everyone but me.
That's correct.
Yes, good morning.
You will not see each other during this video. You will only see the moderators. Verdell Jones, yes, welcome from last night. Conversations with Verdell Jones.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Ivy Lynn Davis Bell, dental practice in Baldwin, and also my dentist.
Wonderful, wonderful. We're so excited that each of you are joining with us on this morning. We are so excited about the launch that is getting ready to happen, that is happening now. We are grateful that you all are joining us. Please, please, please share your information. We want to know where you're from. We want you to definitely type in your name, type in your business or the organization that you are affiliated with. All right, Earl, all the way from Orlando, Florida. Welcome. So glad to have you.
Earl was my neighbor when I lived in Cambria Heights, Queens.
Wow.
He lived in the block. Mm-hmm.
So wonderful. Come on in. We got some great panelists that will be with us today and helping us to maneuver through this launch. We are so excited about Vision Street Research, and we are going to begin momentarily. We just want you to invite a friend. Hi, Teresa.
Hi, Teresa. Sobley's in the building. Urban League of Long Island.
Invite a friend. Call a neighbor. Tell them we are on. We are live. Let's get it started. It's Friday. Happy Friday, everybody.
Hi, Yolanda. Welcome from Atlanta.
Atlanta is in the house.
Renee Flagler, Girls Inc. Long Island is in the house. Thank you. And a Baldwin resident. Baldwin Strong. See? Hashtag
Baldwin
Baldwin
Strong is in the house. We are super excited that you all are joining us this morning. Happy Friday. It's a beautiful day out. We are getting ready to have a beautiful launch. So please, definitely, yes, Baldwin Strong. Hashtag. We see you. We see you over here in Freeport. We see
Yeah, it's
you.
all right. It's all right. Yeah, it'll be okay. It'll be okay.
We're still neighbors. Nothing but love. Okay. Just another 2 more minutes, a minute or so, and we're going to launch right into this bad boy.
Yes.
We want you to buckle up, fasten your seatbelt. You are getting ready to go for an experience, a wonderful ride today. Yes, Connecticut is in the house. Welcome.
Nice. Crystal Turner Moffett, also a member of the U.S. Black Women Coalition of Black Women Businesses.
Thank you for joining us this morning. We are super excited to have each of you with us this morning.
I'm going to take a quick screenshot of everybody, just to let you know.
Kadisha is our star intern representing Roosevelt, Long Island. Roosevelt is in the building. She'll be live tweeting.
Yes.
Tell you more about that momentarily.
Absolutely. All right.
And our esteemed co-moderator is here. And now we can get started.
I was on the link. I was on the other. I guess there's 2 links. I was on a different one.
Yeah, you were the one for the guests, but you're an esteemed panelist.
Oh, okay.
An esteemed panelist. So we're going to get started. Everybody, welcome. We are so excited that you have joined us this morning to share in with us this virtual launch on this morning for Vision Street Research. Clap it up, everybody. Yeah. We are excited, yes, to be launching another minority woman-owned business here in Nassau County, here on Long Island, here in the state of New York, here in the United States of America. We are super excited. From Atlanta to New York, yes. Vision Street Research is in the house, and we are super excited. I'm your host for today, none other than Dexter Hedgepeth. I'm honored to be here, and I'm honored to help maneuver you guys through this virtual business launch on today. And so without further ado, we're going to get started, and I'm going to introduce some of those persons who will be working with us today, our esteemed panelists that will be working with us and who has helped to put this effort on. First, we have Kadisha Cox, and she is a senior at the University of Albany, studying business administration with a concentration in marketing. She also serves as the intern for Vision Street Research, and we are super excited for her being with us today and all of the work that she has done to help make this event a huge success. So let's clap it up and give it up for her. Wave to the people, please. All right. Next, we have Kiana Abadati. Did I pronounce that right?
Abadi.
Kiana Abadi. She is here joining with us from the New American Leaders Corporation, where she serves as the program manager for that nationally known organization. Kiana has a BA/MA in political science with a focus on disproportionment of women elected officials running for local offices. She has served 2 female elected officials here in the great state of New York, and she brings with her a wealth of knowledge as far as campaigning and women candidates campaigning, plus fundraising. And we are so excited to have her with us on this morning. Would you be so kind to wave to the people?
Good morning, everyone.
Right. Good morning. Then we have Mr. Daniel Lloyd, who is the founder and president of the Minority Millennials, Inc., a not-for-profit organization currently bridging the gap between policy and culture, with a mission focused on tackling disempowering narratives around minority communities and mobilizing millennials with the tools needed to become the next generation of change makers in public policy. Good morning, Dan.
Good morning. Happy Friday. Let's do it.
Happy Friday. Let's get it on. Last but not least, the one and only Mr. Jacob Dixon is the founder and CEO of Choice for All, a social justice organization here in Roosevelt and across Long Island with a mission to advance programs and policies that ensure every child is healthy and thrives regardless of their zip code. Jacob brings close to 15 years of experience as an educator, social impact strategist, child advocate, and a community organizer. Teach for America alumni, Jacob also currently serves as an adjunct professor at Bank Street College of Education, focusing his future research on cross-sector collaboration between families, schools, and communities and systems towards students' achievement. Let's give it up for Mr. Jacob Dixon. Say good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday to you all.
Happy Friday. And without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Dixon himself.
All right. Thank you, Dexter. I'm sorry, Erica.
Yeah, so before Jacob continues, actually, though, we're going to take a moment to show a quick video that'll kind of prep up for what he's about to share.
Yes.
So I'm going to share my screen. I just want everybody to know that that commercial was actually created for me by Verdell Jones. So I want to give a shout out and thank you. This is all about women supporting women as well as men, but definitely Black Girl Magic is in full effect. And I truly appreciate her not only interviewing me yesterday evening, but also helping to put together that commercial.
All right, peace family. Give everybody a few minutes to hop on. Make sure you're liking and sharing the video. For everyone who
That was weird.
Uh-oh, did we get Zoom bombed?
No, we weren't. That's what I was like, what? Now. Somebody shared it? No. Something just started automatically playing on YouTube. Love technology when it just auto plays. But now I'll share it back over to Jacob to continue with the discussion.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here on this beautiful and amazing Friday and what I believe is this launch of something that's been long overdue, but it is time. We've had this saying among us lately that the time is now, and that is the essence of who Erica represents. I've had the pleasure of knowing Erica now for, I believe, 4 years, but it feels like forever. We actually met together when we first started at, well, my nonprofit organization, Choice for All, and Erica coming in as the director of programs for Sustainable Long Island. She was part of an effort of a grant known as Creating Healthy Schools and Communities grant with Western Suffolk BOCES and New York State Department of Health. And from that first moment that we've met onward, it's always been an ongoing partnership, and we've had some amazing successes together and some good work and some very intentional conversations about how to move things forward. And so ranging from community health research that she's done with Hofstra University with us, known as LIGHTCARP, the Long Island Community Academic Research Partnership, for instance. She helped create focus groups in our communities around safe streets, complete streets, healthy food access, And as a result of that, we were able to get not only statewide recognition, but actually an award-winning plan that should be adopted in the town of Hempstead. We will be able to create what's called the Vision Zero Roosevelt Plan. And that goal is to eliminate all traffic fatalities, and injuries by 2030. And in addition to that, she's helped us with our Healthy Corner Store Network initiative, which is basically bringing in healthy fresh fruits and vegetables in our corner stores. We have 30 in our home community in Roosevelt, which is 1 square mile. And while some may seem that that's a lot, for us, it's a rite of passage to go to our corner store and get that in our form of accessibility. And so how do we use that as the medium to make sure that people get access to fruits and vegetables? And so she single-handedly helped us out in creating that with a team of folks that came in through this effort. And now it's been recognized as well and featured in Newsday for the growth of our program. She's helped support our small businesses, even by providing capacity building with our Roosevelt Public Library. And now we're creating a virtual business directory of all of those who are on our main street of Nassau Road and Babylon Turnpike in partnership with the Roosevelt Chamber of Commerce. She's actually knocked on doors and living room conversations with our fellow communities with our Roosevelt Votes campaign, our nonpartisan civic engagement work with St. Francis Street Park and getting that restored. And thanks to her effort of organizing, with my own background of organizing, we were able to get 2,500 signatures with the Environmental Bond Act in order to get that restored. And so, and now just recently, we've launched a new project together with the State of the Black Long Island Equity Council on researching the economic impact on COVID-19 on Black Long Islanders. And so as I mentioned all of this to show you the depth and the work and the commitment that Erica brings to the table, but most of all, she understands the complexity of it, and she makes sure that we follow through. She understands what's at stake, especially for communities of color, and also wanted to make sure that she's willing to roll up her sleeves and get the job done. And personally, what I admire about her the most is her resiliency, her tenacity, and her vision for a stronger, equitable Long Island, and ultimately a stronger, equitable New York State. I consider her a close friend and a sister in this work. And I know that in this work, we can't do it alone, but I'm grateful to have her by our side. And so it's my honor and my distinct pleasure to introduce a person who is for the people, with the people, by the people, the founder and our principal of Vision Street Research, Erica Hill.
Thank you. Wow. You're going to be my introduction person like that. I was like, who is the person he's talking about? Like that. Thank you so much, Jacob, for the introduction. Welcome, everybody. I'm overjoyed and excited that everybody is here. I'm really excited to have kind of my millennial crew with me for this great occasion, the launch of Vision Street Research. I started this originally in 2012 when I was in Atlanta. I had just graduated from Rutgers Edward J. Blaustein School of Planning and Policy Development. And it was 2011 and the job market was terrible. I didn't want to stay in New York. I graduated on May 15th. And on May 16th, I packed up my car and drove back to Atlanta. So that's how serious I was about leaving. I actually was fortunate enough to be able to work for NeighborWorks America Southern District. And then from there, was introduced to a woman by the name of Kelly Burton, who I came to know and respect, who kind of planted the seed in my head of I could actually start a business. And I was like, I don't really know how to do that. How do I do that? And she's like, let me explain it to you. So she really walked me through the whole process. I founded Vision Street Research January 2012 in Lithonia, Georgia, which is in DeKalb County, Georgia, for those that are here from Georgia or know about Georgia. It's a predominantly African-American community. It was suffering from foreclosure situations at the time. And I was really excited to launch it. I focused a lot on project management. My first client was a nonprofit akin to Urban League State of Black Long Island initiative. It was Partnership for Southern Equity. And they're all about equity being the growth model, and that, the whole idea of if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? And unfortunately, a lot of times our communities of color are always on the menu, never at the table, never bringing a chair to the table, never even invited to the table. They're just on the menu being kind of picked off. And I really wanted to be able to be kind of what Gandhi says, the change I want to see in the world. So I worked with them on their Metro Atlanta Equity Atlas. It was the first atlas in the Southern District. I was able to do community outreach. I went throughout the county system talking to folks about some of the information that we found from the maps. One of the maps kind of showed like the the unleveling in terms of the demographics between the North and South Atlanta. And you could see like all of the Black people lived on one part of Atlanta, and on all the jobs and transportation was someplace else, right? So then there was a spatial mismatch. Like the transportation system is not interconnected. So some of the issues similar to what Dan Lloyd, Minority Millennials just brought up on Instagram about transportation. When you don't have access to transportation, that prevents you from being able to do a lot of basic things, getting a job, going to work, being able to go to certain health institutions. Like you're just kind of stuck. And then you suffer the consequences of unfortunately being stuck. I stayed with them for about 2 years and then, worked for some other companies. I worked for a minority male business enterprise as my first job out of undergrad. But pretty much in 2016, it was time to come back home to Long Island. And I came back to Long Island and, really learned the value of maintaining relationships and the value of internships, right? So I interned at Sustainable Long Island as a graduate student. So as a graduate student, I was helping them do research on food trucks, food policy councils, the farmers markets. There was a pilot in Roosevelt, and there was a pilot in North Belmore. Those are the only two, and they were trying to figure out like how this could work. So we actually, myself and another student, were looking at surveys to see like what the community thought about the farmers market, and most of the feedback said they loved that it was youth run, and they loved that all the food that was being provided was homegrown, right? That it was grown on Long Island. Also with the Food Policy Council, they were trying to figure out how to set it up. So fast forward, July 2016, I see that they're looking for someone to oversee their program. And I, had this glowing recommendation from my former supervisor as an intern saying, yeah, I worked on all these projects. So now there's a Suffolk County Food Policy Council. Now there are multiple farmers markets in both Nassau and Suffolk County, but that was seeded in the work that Sustainable Long Island had done while I was an intern. So, unfortunately, they had to close in 2017. And we had another election year. So what I also learned is during election years, they have something called a transition team. And these transition team are trusted stakeholders of that elected official who they then ask to help them interview prospective people for their office. So I applied to both the comptroller, Jack Schneerman's team, as well as the county executive, Laura Kern's team. I was fortunate that I did get an interview with the comptroller. I went through a series of interviews and then I was working for the county, something that I'd always wanted to do when I went to grad school. The whole point was to use the expertise and knowledge that I got to be a community planner in a government setting, because what I realized was in order to truly make impact, you had to impact from the top and be able to impact the policy. So I wanted to be in an office in government where they were making the decisions that were impacting other communities and be able to be a person of influence. So while at the comptroller's office, I had a great experience. I was able to work with the Minority Women Business Enterprise Committee and was able to connect with Dexter Hedgepath, who works for the Office of Minority Affairs. I was able to meet Kiana because she not only was the chief of staff for my legislator, Debbie Muley, but just was an awesome millennial doing great things in the community that I wanted to be connected with. And we were able to collaborate on several things. I was made aware of Dan Lloyd, but never got the pleasure of meeting him while I was at the comptroller's office, but always heard a lot about the great work that minority millennials were doing. I was able to continue working with Jacob, but in a different capacity. Jacob served on the nonprofit steering committee, so I was able to both be a liaison between the office and the nonprofit community. So when the nonprofits had concerns that they wanted the comptroller to look into, they knew that they could trust me and come to me, and I would voice their opinions in the way it was delivered. And last but certainly not least, I was able to run an internship program where I was fortunate to meet my lovely intern, Kadisha Cox. So what you see here today is a collaboration of relationships. And I'm so happy to get the actual conversation started about how we can just make Long Island better and make sure that people of color have more access and opportunities to the things that they deserve.
Love it.
Great. So at this time, we're going to turn it over to Kiana and to Dan, and they're going to take us into the next segment.
Alrighty. and we are going to be asking questions. Daniel, myself, and Daniel will be asking questions of our esteemed business members to have a great conversation of what we can do to further expand millennial participation and millennial entrepreneurship, specifically within our minority communities on Long Island. Dan, do you want to do a brief introduction for yourself and your organization first?
Yeah, so my name is Dan Lloyd. Actually, I'm a native Long Islander. I come from Wyandanch, New York. I'm a social entrepreneur by passion. And so, we started Minority Millennials in 2017, just as an incentive to get who we are by definition, Minority Millennials, more involved into the civic engagement of Suffolk County specifically, even more specific to the town of Babylon. Me and my peers realized that there was huge projects going on, like Wyandanch Village and the Wyandanch Plaza Association developments. I mean, it was 500, it was 100 million. It was a couple of $100 million project going on in Wyandanch, and many of us did not know what was going on. So that's kind of like what spurred the interest to get more involved into how can we have a say? How can we make sure that our community is improving with developments, but the culture and the tradition of a community like Wyandanch was sustained? And so we started in 2017 just by getting more people registered to vote, get civically engaged. And 3 years, it's kind of ballooned into an organization that's bridging the gap between workforce development. We have partnerships with a number of corporations like Merrill Lynch and Huntington Launchpad, and as well as now we're going into economic development. So how are we getting investment into ideas? How are we getting investment into ideas from millennials and Gen Z of color, and making sure that our idea goes into an actual business model that brings in revenue and also spurs human capital investment and GDP growth into Long Island. So we're super excited about where this is going. And more importantly, we just want the idea and the concept of policy to be appealing. We want this to be something that people just look at the same way they look at sports, the same way they look at entertainment, the same way they look at social media. That this is something that's fun, exciting, and really has the most value and the most influence as to how we shape what our communities look like.
Beautiful. And briefly to explain what I'm working on right now, I am the Women's Program Manager for an organization called New American Leaders. So we are working on training not only the next generation of women leaders, but women who identify with immigrant backgrounds. So we work with a large subset of Long Island communities and New York communities to make sure that not only do we have a seat at the table, but learn how to take charge and be in leadership roles. So we work hand in hand with other organizations that are providing trainings, political trainings, for people to take leadership positions, not only on campaigns, but in areas of influence like government or school boards. We have a large subset of work that we tend to focus on. So we can jump on into our questions. And I have our first one being, how does your experience as a minority millennial entrepreneur, specifically in Atlanta, so I'm going to tailor this to Erica, compare to your experience here on Long Island?
So yeah, that's interesting. So when I started my business in Atlanta, I had 2 other businesses that I started shortly after. And I found that in Atlanta, there was more of a sense of community as it relates to millennials in general, but definitely minority millennials, which Atlanta is demographically is more African American. But there were boot camps, there were pitch competitions, like there were all these hubs and things that were welcoming of millennials, and actually were being run by black millennials, which was really nice. Like you could go and test out your ideas with people, right? You could meet with people for coffee in different places that were just known for gatherings of young entrepreneurs. So it was great to have that support just at the very onset of my business. What I have found here, and even before I started the business here, just working for the county, what I noticed was that because Long Island is already so segregated and segmented, it makes it very challenging for a minority business owner in general, but for millennials to be able to connect in a more cohesive way. So I would say, like, if it wasn't for working at the comptroller's office and probably working at the nonprofit Sustainable Long Island, I wouldn't have these relationships that I do have with you guys and other people that I know run their businesses. So I feel like minority millennials is definitely a group that is taking the lead to help overcome that. The thing is, Long Island is just so big, so it's trying to figure out what's a happy medium where people can convene places that is convenient, right? So like I live in Nassau County, and I joked last night on the interview with Verdell, but I typically do not go past Central Islip, right? And I say Central Islip because one of my close friends, her mom lives in Central Islip, right? I know that it's 30 minutes door to door. Anything beyond that for me is a bit much, right? I don't enjoy driving, which is a fact, right? But I live on Long Island, so I can't take a train to Central Islip. I can't even take a train to the town, to where Daniel lives, right? Like I have to drive. And driving becomes a very taxing thing. So when you layer that with like people are at work all day and then they're being asked to drive someplace else, it becomes a disincentive. So for me, actually, the pandemic has helped overcome that because everything is virtual. So I can talk to Daniel every day, right? Like from the comfort of my home. And I could talk to people who are in New York City, people that are in Atlanta, wherever. Like it doesn't involve travel. So I feel like now with our new normal that it'll afford us the opportunity to be able to better engage because people are now becoming more accustomed to using technology to communicate. So you don't have to worry about the commute as much. So I'm optimistic that the cohesiveness of minority millennial entrepreneurs will be improved between the work that Daniel is doing and I think all of us working together.
Love it.
All right. Daniel, do you want to ask a question or
Yeah.
am I the...
So the second question here is, what are segments of the population should be most concerned about being undercounted and why?
So I'm going to start and then I'm going to have Jacob and Daniel can actually jump in on this. We all have become involved in the census. So the 2020 census is going on now. I'm going to say that again. The 2020 census is going on now. So we're going to put in the chat, if you have not completed the 2020 census, we're going to be on till 12:30. It takes 10 minutes. I repeat, 10 minutes to complete the census. So during this call, I'm perfectly okay if you get off the call or off the video temporarily to go fill out the census, right? Because that's who I am, right? Like I need you to complete the census. I'll still be here. This is being recorded. It'll be okay. But I need you to complete the census because New York State is one of 10 states that runs the risk of losing a congressional seat. Okay, why does that matter? Because right now we're already up against a machine of a person who I will say does not favor people of color. And that's just putting it politely. So if we lose the congressional seat, we're losing someone that's going to be there to advocate for us, at least for the state, right? It's somebody that we put in place. The other reason is there's a lot of money that's at stake. When you look at what is going on now with the pandemic, in terms of people not having access to resources, people who are food insecure, health disparities, all of those things in terms of funds for like Medicare and Medicaid, Section 8 housing, school lunch programs, Head Start, just to name a few, those are all determined by the census, right? So even if it's not you personally that needs to use that, I'm sure there's somebody in your family, like there's a grandparent, there's an aunt, there's a neighbor that uses Medicare, right? There's somebody that you know that needs housing. There's someone that you know that needs to take advantage of some of these programs. So I would say the people, in terms of the segments, it's young kids, so kids 0 to 5. So in 2010, people just didn't count their babies, right? They didn't think about it. Like, oh, they're, baby, they're not like completely old enough. But the problem with that is the census is only done every 10 years. So when you don't count your kid, that means 10 years later, we didn't account for them either, right? Like, so there wasn't resources. So you have overcrowded schools, like whatever other programs your child may need, they weren't accounted for in the count. And it was worse for children that are African-American and Latino. They were even more likely to be undercounted in 2010. The other population are the immigrant population, right? Who is already not very trusting of the government anyway, like concerned that by filling this out, they'll be deported or, some sort of punitive damage will be put on them. So they're not being counted. But here again, their children are going to the school, right? They're utilizing the services, but they're not being we're not counting them. They're not being counted. So that means like the funds that should be getting allocated to communities where they're residing is at a deficit, it's insufficient. And I'm going to stop there and let Daniel jump in on this question since he's also.
Yeah. So, I mean, everything that Erica just said is very important and valuable to the census. And as well, just to piggyback on that is, as you can see right now in this crisis, that some of the most impacted are millennials and Gen Z of color because of the industry that we work in. And so the census is important because workers earning poverty level wages are disproportionately female, Black, and Hispanic between the ages of 18 and 25. So being counted in the census helps create higher wage jobs, believe it or not. And the same thing with regards to minority entrepreneurship. If we have the proper, if we're counted properly and represented properly, we can get more federal funding into things like small business development centers. And then we have to make sure that we hold ourselves accountable to make those resources available to our community. But that all comes from being represented properly and being counted. I think a very interesting statistic is that with Black males specifically, and I know Jacob, you can clarify this as well. For every Black male that's not counted in the census, we're losing $4,000 for each individual within the community. And I think there was an astronomical number of 1.5 million, or this year, 1.5 million Black men are at risk of not being counted because of a number of different reasons, from transient households to, unfortunately, a disproportionate rate of imprisonment. And so it's very important to fill out the census for funding and for, again, investment into ideas, healthcare, and small business. So I'll just kick it off to Jacob to kind of bring it to the finish line. I like that shirt, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was in the spirit of this positive event
I love
that we're
it.
having here. We need to make sure we hold that in. But no, what you both said was absolutely right. And I think just to close it out, you know, we've been saying, just as a collective, as a group, and across that 10 minutes impacts 10 years. You know, we have to make this issue of the census as relatable as we can. How can people touch it, feel it, or see it, right? So for instance, bus transportation. People who take the bus every day is impacted by your census count. If you are a recipient of SNAP or WIC or any other federal programs, this number matters. If you're talking about in terms of dollar distribution and elected representatives, this number matters. In a way that we need to make sure that our lives matter and count in this, it's important that we get out there to the census and make this as relatable as possible. So sometimes when we enter into these conversations, and what I love about what Dan and Erica just did was relate it to us as a community, so that way we can understand, wow, I see myself in this, let me take the 10 minutes. And so we don't create that sense of urgency for people to understand it. Of course, it's just going to be brushed off. It's just another thing the government is asking us to do, versus recognizing the significance behind that. So thank you for sharing that, because that's what matters, is that we have to make it relatable to everyone.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And speaking of the census and being counted, and the industries that Black and Brown communities tend to be most participants of, we're dealing with a global pandemic. And for whatever reason, even though we don't represent the majority of the country, we are the majority of individuals who are impacted by this COVID-19. And can we briefly touch on that? I just have a few questions of why are we being so disproportionately impacted by this pandemic? And I'll let that be a question open to the floor, because I'm sure those of you who are very active in the census would be just as active in tallying the response to COVID-19 or lack of response.
I'll start, and I just want to give a shout out to the New York Urban League. Last month, they kicked off a series around COVID-19 and just the impact on African Americans. And some of the stats that they shared, which I thought they were spot on, but they were also disturbing to read. were that the reason why Black and brown people are being so disproportionately impacted by the pandemic is, one, they represent 75% of frontline workers, right? So the people that were the essential workers, the people who we know have to go to work, are going to work every day, right? They're the ones trying to keep our family, friends, coworkers alive, you know, like day in and day out. They're putting themselves in harm's way to help save people, but also to make a living. The second thing is the majority of people who are in the healthcare industry tend to be Black and brown people, right? So like, even if you take out like, so people that may be doing like EMT, but if you're talking about like nurses and people working in hospitals, things of that nature, overwhelmingly it's Black and brown people. The other thing, which I think is a really big thing now, I think if we just think about all of us, is social distancing is a privilege. I'm gonna say it again. Social distancing is a privilege that many people are not privy to, right? So people that are earning those hourly wages that Daniel talked about, they don't have that privilege. Because guess what? If they socially distant, they will be socially unemployed.
Mm.
Right? Like it's not an option to just stay at home. Like staying at home means they're not able to feed their kids. They're not able to pay their bills. Right? So that's a big issue that is impacting a lot of our Black and brown sisters and brothers. The other thing is there was some myth that was put out there in the beginning of our melanin protected us from COVID-19. And people believed it. And they were out, you know, people out clubbing, they out at the bar, they just living their best life. But it's a myth. We are not precluded from getting COVID. And then now if you look at the numbers, let's take Long Island, take Hempstead.
Completely false. Yeah.
When this first started, the Hempstead numbers, the Hempstead and Elmont numbers were between like 34 and 93. 34 and 93, right? Those sound like not that bad, right? Within a couple of weeks, Hempstead's number went over 1,000, right? Now, part of it is Hempstead is a dense area, right? So in dense populations, it's a lot easier for something like that to spread. But that just shows you, like in community, people are living in close quarters, how quickly something like this can easily spread. And, you know, even if people are being socially distant, like you're still in a building, people may, you know, the cleaning and everything may not be getting done, but like it's impacted us overwhelmingly. And then the last thing is when you think about what they tell you, you need to like check off the list before you can go get tested for COVID-19. They say, do you have any pre-existing conditions? Well, guess what? Black and brown people always have pre-existing conditions, right? We're disproportionately impacted with health disparities. So chronic issues like high blood pressure, heart disease, high cholesterol, obesity. Like I can speak for in Roosevelt, the work we were doing around health equity. People are going to corner stores to go grocery shopping. Corner stores, right? So it's canned food and it's things that are high in sodium, high in fat. Like they haven't been traditionally healthy foods. So then you layer that with this pandemic, and then let's not forget they may not have access to healthcare, like a health food store. How do we recover from it, from just a health perspective?
I think it's important, and one of the questions that came in also, Erica, from the group chat, I believe this came from Urban League, was about what strategic partnerships should we be forming to rebuild the Black community post-COVID-19 pandemic, right? And I think that, you know, looking at how we acknowledge all of these issues that were being brought up, I think one of the key things that we need to talk about is collaboration, right? And examples of what we've been doing across the board to make sure that this new normal is being addressed in a way that makes sure that our lives matter and that we are a priority in the conversation, right? And so for instance, you know, the work that we were just doing to recently launch the survey, you know, working with minority millennials to talk about different spaces with, you know, how do we do that? I know later on this afternoon, there's a conversation with the Attorney General with minority millennials about how do we be able to engage folks in this conversation. You know, these are the types of spaces and more things that we need to build out about it. But I think it would be great just to kind of talk about that a little bit as a group of what other partnerships should we be forming, or what other tools that we need to be bringing to help acknowledge that this is our plight, but now here are the solutions that we could bring change to it. So what would be some quick examples that we could talk about?
You know, I'll jump off. I just think, again, to me, the most important thing is to utilize this data for metrics of progress. So if we're looking at that, if we're going to talk about young people, what partnerships are appealing? to them to get them to understand what's happening. We're just looking at young people. It could be an influencer. Again, I see a lot, like for instance, like Cardi B is doing a lot with the census. So how can Long Island representatives, how can us, everyone here in this chat, partner with influencers that bring attention to young people on Long Island so that we at least get their attention for the first 5 minutes. I think as far as more professional and specific type of growth, it's relationships or partnerships like with Newsday, for example, or banks or universities that are trusting us and investing in us to make sure that we're not only being leaders and trusted voices, but showing metrics and proof of progress for periods of time. So if we partner with a bank or we partner with a university, how are we showing progress in 3 months, in 6 months? Is it the amount of young people or millennials and Gen Z of color that filled out the census? Is it the amount of people that actually not only registered but voted? So I think that's very important that the partnerships show growth, and that within action creates reaction. So if we're making this appealing and young people are getting involved, we can then leverage that to get more investment, social impact investment from the outside to again spur growth within Long Island. So I think it's like a trifecta effect.
Absolutely, where it's more than just one strategy in place. It's going to be a multi-pronged approach because there's multiple layers that are connected to our communities at heart. So,
and I think one thing is to be careful. We have to remember is not to, we're always reminding ourselves this as an organization is not always shoot for the stars. As far as like, let's get the biggest influence or make it the most appealing or the best partnership, because we have to be able to still make sure our feet are on the ground and that we're in tune with what's going on. We're not disconnected from the emotion and from the pain. It's very important.
I think something else as well is partnering with government. So earlier this week, Urban League Long Island did a webinar about the state of Black businesses, right? So as a Black business on Long Island, like I'm concerned, not for myself, but I am concerned for some of the brick and mortar businesses that are here. So Kevin Law gave this interesting statistic, and while it's not broken down racially, I think the numbers speak volume. So what he shared was that on Long Island, there are about 105,000 small businesses, right? And then 93,000 of them have 20 or less employees, right? So that for me is small. I know for the federal government, 500 or less is small. But when I think about like Sweet and Savory or Benny B's and Fish Trap, right? They have an average of maybe 5 people that are working there. And it's predominantly young people, right? Which is it's all about workforce development that are in their establishment that they want to keep employed, right? They want to stay open and keep providing food to the community, right? So they need to be able to get those resources. And I know in order now, I mean, all of them stayed open through the pandemic, right? Some people closed, but they've been open. But I know moving forward, for you to be in compliance with what the governor is talking about, there are some other things that you're going to have to do, right? So it includes like this, special type of cleaning and, like all these protocols that you're going to have in place. So the question that I posed on the webinar, and Kevin agreed that it was a great question, is, okay, but is there going to be funds allotted to these truly small businesses, right? Truly small businesses that have taken their house out on, line of equity from their house and put all of their life savings into their business to be able to afford these compliance factors, right? Like they want to be able to stay open. Yes, they have masks, but in order for people to come back into their establishment, they have to be able to follow all these things. So where's the money that's coming to them, and not money that has so many barriers? So for me, one of the people to partner with is our local, to start with our local governments. Like, I feel like, to Daniel's point, we go really high, right? We go right to like, let's go after like the state, I want to start with the local people, right? Like, let's have a conversation with my legislator. Let's have a conversation with the minority legislators, right? In these communities, and to talk to them, like, how can we work together to come up with a plan that then equips you to go to take it up further, right? But we have to start with the local conversations to truly understand the issues that are facing the businesses, and not necessarily like telling them like, here, take this program, take this loan, we'll forgive it. Like nobody believes that. I get that they say that, but as a small business owner, like, just because you tell me it'll be forgiven, if it's not, I'm still stuck with the bill, right? So let's talk to me as the business owner about what I want, what would be best for me. So what Jacob and I are doing in collaboration, the survey that was launched yesterday was like also doing one with businesses, Black businesses on Long Island, to do exactly that, to ask them like, what do you need, right? What do you need right now that can help you? And I feel like we need to ask those critical questions to make sure, again, to Daniel's point, we use the data to then have these appropriate conversations with our elected officials on the local level, to then be able to take it up the chain to really make sure that people understand that Long Island is here, Long Island counts, which is why you need to fill out the census, and we need you, right, I'm gonna keep saying that for the whole time. and you just know that, like, I'm going to. And we need to make sure that we get this money down to the truly local small businesses, right? Like the 500 people, 500 businesses, are like 500 employees or more. I'm not discounting that they need money too, but what has happened is those super local small businesses have not gotten anything.
At all.
Or there's so many barriers that they need. You're asking me to be open, to do a curbside checkout, but now I have to fill out this expansive like loan application. And then, you know, I've been on the calls, people are waiting to be called back or hear back. Like, I don't have the time to do all of that. I was in like Mother's Day weekend, I was in Dunn's River Lounge in Rockville Center. They didn't even take a lunch break. Like, they were so overwhelmed, which is a good thing to have, but overwhelmed with the business of people like wanting to order food for Mother's Day. They couldn't answer the phone. They couldn't even check their email. Right. So you know that they can't sit and go through like some lengthy thing for a loan. It's not even grant, right? It's a loan. So like, where's the grant money? Where's the money that I know, like the non-discretionary dollars that I know can be allocated to this, right? I know governments have it because they use it for other things. So now is the time is now to use those money for our communities to make sure that they can be, they can stay open and they can still thrive, because I need that. I'm in Baldwin. I don't want my Black-owned businesses to close because they just ran out of money.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think coming out of this, it's unfortunate the time that we're in. It's unfortunate the great risk that not only our communities are facing, but every community is facing. But ultimately, what I'm excited to see is the other side. And there's so much more opportunity for adjustment and correction, and just a kind of renaissance of how not only we do business, but how governments handle certain issues, and how, you know, certain people are now brought in to have better conversations, which, crossing my fingers, I hope that's how we come out of this ordeal, is, you know, more appreciation for not only our Mother Earth and our environment, but our communities and our businesses, and how we can be more collaborative, and how we want our government to be representative of its actual people. I think there's really great opportunity if done the right way, for us to really change the country and make it more sustainable for our community. It's unfortunate that, you know, it's happening this way, but I like to be the positive one to think of how this can benefit us in the long run. And I think that ultimately we'll be able to come out of this with a much clearer understanding of how we want our communities to be interacted with, and how we want our businesses to thrive, and how we want our government to better itself for us. I think there's just a lot of opportunity for us to really make great strides. And I'll get off my soapbox. And in addition to continuing our conversation about all of the different collaborative work that we've done, Erica, I know that you and I worked on Sherry James' campaign for Town of Hempstead, where she was running for town council. What did you get any training to help prepare her for that? And how was your experience? What was our experience with that? I could talk about this all day. But we don't have that kind of time.
No. Dexter will rein us in, as that is what he does well. He will cut us off real quick. But I actually myself and Dexter actually had the pleasure of going to the Black Campaign School in DC. So I would definitely say we can put the link in the chat. Somebody can put the link in the chat. But it was definitely worthwhile. We went to DC. We were surrounded by other either aspiring campaign staff or elected officials or people that were currently in a race. There were several people that we saw there that were in a race. But I feel like we walked away not only feeling like empowered and inspired because the facilitator was someone that had worked on Stacey Abrams' campaign. And while I don't live in Georgia, I forever love Atlanta and was rooting for her and wanted her to win. So it was nice to be in that training with somebody that was kind of walking us through some of the challenges that they even faced, right? And things to consider as you're going through the campaign. And I feel like for me, when I came back and started working like more directly with Shari on the campaign, like I kept those things in mind that I learned from that training, as well as I kind of took away, unfortunately, though, that millennials do feel disconnected, right? Like even though Shari is a millennial and was a millennial running for an office, right, where she had a great platform, she has excellent expertise and background, people did not want to leave their house. And we were not in a pandemic, let's be very clear.
Yep.
Okay, we were not in a pandemic, and I went to someone's house. It was a young lady. I know from the voting app, like she was about 30, I think 34. And it was early voting just started in New York. It's already been in Georgia. So you can vote early. You don't have to stand in lines. The voting poll was down the street. I repeat, down the street. I said, can I count on you to support candidate James? She said, it depends on how I feel when I wake up. And I said, well, if we come and get you, will you go? And she was like, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Right. And these are people that are registered as a Democrat. I mean, again, I'm not pushing anybody's your party, but the point is, like, you're a registered voter, right? But like, and you have a new candidate running against an incumbent who looks like you and is you know, the young lady was West Indian, Shari's West Indian, like had all these relatable things and had a platform to improve the community. That did not matter. She did not feel like leaving her house to go down the street to vote. Mm-hmm. That for me is a problem.
So as a campaign manager, I use all the tactics that I possibly can because I'm going to get you to vote. I will guilt you. I will bully you. I will bring you the absentee ballot. I will creep on you. I will troll you on social media. Whatever I need to do to get you to vote is what I'm going to do. But as a woman of color who's been a campaign manager and who's knocked on numerous doors, I would say that right now I know the layout of Long Island better than I know my own house because I've not been in so many different areas talking to so many different people. And to be in a white neighborhood and talking about voting in comparison to a predominantly Black neighborhood and talking about voting is almost like the difference between Fox News and CNN. There is such a strong disconnect between the importance and the value of your vote in the white community as opposed to the Black and brown community. And it is and even when you're petitioning in the early stages of campaigning, you know, trying to get your candidate's name on the ballot, I would have conversations with individuals who were registered to vote. And there were some communities, obviously the older Black community, of course, always turns out, you know, the largest voting population are always Black women and older Black women. But when you start to get down to our generation or, you know, younger, those who are just now getting ready to vote, they don't know what petitioning is and they don't want to sign anything. There's a lack of motivation to participate. And it's disheartening. I literally, when I was walking in my community of Freeport, I was speaking to a young Hispanic man and I was getting the petition signed and I said, you know, read this, look at these names. There's only one name that looks remotely like yours or sounds like it could be someone of Hispanic descent. this is, and she's the woman I was referring to. It was a great elected official. She did what she needed to do. This is Sylvia Cabana, and I was communicating with this individual like, I don't think you understand how disappointing it is for our communities to only have two viable options, Shara James and Sylvia Cabana. Look at your neighborhood. There are so many opportunities, and there's so much that we deserve from our government. But because you won't sign my petition to get these two names on the ballot, we're going to miss out. And those are the constant conversations that I have, because I refuse for you to tell me no if I'm at your door. I just refuse. I will not. And it became very disappointing, the 2018 election, because there was just so much opportunity for change and continuous growth. And people just get so stuck in, well, this is what it's always been, so we'll change it eventually. And our generation is really motivated, but I think we just get so bogged down with how much we have to change and how much is not going in our favor, that we stagnate and get stuck in trying to move. And it was in 2018 where I really watched the election and watched those numbers come in, especially since it didn't even make sense, because there wasn't much that the other candidates were saying that was any different or any better than what they've said in previous years. So it was literally, it was the hardest slap in the face, because it was, nothing has changed, nothing has gotten better. You have a strong candidate, a slate of strong candidates who not only want to do better and continue to move forward, and because you didn't want to leave your house or you didn't want to sign a petition, you didn't want to participate. So I think there's a lot of work to be done in terms of reassessing the true nature of our civic engagement, especially in Nassau, because I know that Daniel and his organization have been doing great work. We need to bring that to Nassau and just kind of jolt it with, I don't know, as many megawatts of electricity as we possibly can, because we're here. There are millennials of color living on Long Island. We're living with our grandparents, and from what research I have been able to do, we have pretty stable jobs. So it's really just a matter of getting us back out and getting us more involved in government and politics, because it's the best way that we can change Long Island moving forward, specifically Nassau. Getting off my soapbox now.
I just think one quick point to add before you go to the next question, I think we have to be mindful of, is that I think what we're used to doing as traditional forms of organizing and connecting with people is not the same anymore in ways at which you relate to people, particularly when it comes down to voting engagement and civic engagement in general. I think that, just bridging off of Stacey Abrams and what she shared most recently, and I shared this during the Office of Minority Affairs event that we had with the Black History Month, is that, African-American voters, for instance, they're considered swing voters in two ways. While people think that swing voters is Democrat and Republican, for African-American voters, it's you're either going to the polls or you're staying at home. And so when we're talking about that, is how do we make sure that we get people from where they're at before to now being involved and getting engaged in there? And I think we, as a people, particularly here on Long Island, have to figure out what that shift is or where that disconnect is coming from, because we're often throwing in solutions as to what we think are traditionally working, and it's not, but it's being utilized as an advantage point for other agendas to move ahead that aren't putting our needs, whether it's millennial, Gen Z, Black communities, in the forefront. And I just think that it's so important, especially with these type of conversations here, that we need to create those safe spaces. When we did Roosevelt Votes campaign with Erica, for instance, and we did a Get Out the Vote education series. And one of the things that we talked about was, okay, what elections do you think you vote for? Some people didn't know that they could vote for the commissioner of the sanitation district. Some people didn't know that you voted for the electors of your local library. And it was literally just because they didn't know that that was an elected position. Whereas most people look at the top of the ticket and say, that's the moment when I have to come out and show. And I think that if we don't get that information and access in a way that's accessible, that has credible messengers in the neighborhood to talk about it, I think that then we're not going to feel like our voices are heard and represented. And again, that level of disconnect. So I think we have to also kind of step outside of what we traditionally know as the usual tactics of engagement and really go, all right, so what is it going to take to connect with that millennial group? What is it going to take to connect with the Gen Z? What is it going to take to connect with the Black mother who's concerned about her birth in 6 months and making sure that that happens to me? I think that, again, I feel a lot of the disconnection is often because what we're used to doing as the core strategy of organizing or engagement is not working. It's not as effective as it needs to be. So how do we reimagine that, as you were saying, Kiana? How do we reimagine that in this new space with us to kind of in the forefront and saying, listen, enough is enough. It's for us, by us. How do we make this possible? So I just say that.
I just wanted to piggyback on that real quick is that I think one of the things that we're really learning, again, as an organization in this time is how crucial short but impactful, emotional, engaging stories are. I think if we need to do a think tank after this, like for the next 3 months, and just come up with 100 different stories and a minute or less, literally like 1 minute stories that are talking about all these different topics and just injecting them into Nassau and Suffolk County on the different pain points. And I think once we get the story into those pain points, we can then circle that into what it is that we want them to go into, if that's voting, if it's that's census, if that's just getting civically engaged. Another thing is, I don't want to go too off topic, but I'm really starting to realize that a lot of our industry, we're disconnected in industry. You know, there's so many different businesses within IDAs, Nassau IDA, Suffolk IDA, Babylon IDA, Hempstead. Majority of these businesses got PPP funding because of the type of industry they're in and the framework that they have set up. So, you know, let's make 1 minute videos about how entrepreneurship could be, mechanical engineering supplies or airplane supplies. Like there's so many different things that we can frame stories around, and it's all marketing, but they're paying, emotionally engaging stories. And as we all know and see, 45 does do an incredible job of creating these weird stories that are emotionally attached to his base. And we also see that disconnect with, look at the rallies that are going on in Comac, you know, and I always tell people I'm from a biracial family. So when I go to my in-laws, you know, they're a white Italian family. They don't know one person that was infected or died from COVID-19. I know 10 personally. Mm-hmm. So there is just a disconnect on Long Island. And if I can't translate my story to my in-laws, they don't know. They have no idea, and they're not looking for it. So we have to do a better job of explaining our story to our community, but also to the white community. We have to just do a better job of that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We still have time. I'm very cognizant of the timekeeper, so I want to make sure that I keep us on track as best as I can. So I will continuing with our conversation. I see that Vision Street Research is collaborating on a COVID-19 survey for Black Long Islanders. Is that finished? How did that come out, Erica? And how long is the survey still open?
So I'm gonna pass it to Jacob. The one for just residents opened yesterday. The one for businesses will be going out at the latest, probably Monday morning, if not today. I've been having some conversations with the businesses in my local community that I talk to, or should I say order from, several times a week. So I'm gonna just, I'll be talking to them about completing it. But Jacob can go into more detail. But I will say, because Jacob and I are both part of Urban League of Long Island State of Black Long Island initiative, SOBLE as it goes, it is part of it became a pivot from a project that we were already working on. And I think the same way that businesses have had to pivot in this pandemic, we made a necessary pivot to be responsive to what is affecting our Black communities right now.
Mm-hmm. And how will that information be shared? I think Jacob just texted in the group.
Yes, I just did that as we were typing on this. So the link is in your chat if everyone doesn't have it, but it's bit.ly/COVID while Black LI. It is a 12-question, average time 6 to 7 minute survey. Really quick, but the goal of this survey is to help us understand the financial impact of COVID-19 and how it has impacted particularly in our Black communities. And it's prevalent and it's important because as we start trying to reimagine the new normal and understanding how we could better support Black folks who are impacted in ways from loss of jobs to lack of healthcare access and things, that we need to be able to capture that in a way that allows us to authenticate your voice. And from there, as Dan talked about so eloquently, really focusing in on the power story. And so I think without having this data and this survey that would take 5 minutes, so please share it with your friends, your neighbors, 5 minutes, send it over as a text message. The more information and the more data that we have, the more authentic the story can be about how it's impacting our neighborhoods. And then from there, the end goal is that we're going to do a second part webinar series where we're going to be able to share out the data in an effort to create a policy agenda and some solutions that enables us to do that, that it's really connected at the ground of folks who are most impacted. And so please be able to share that out with everyone.
All right. And then this is a question for the group. What role have mentors played in your trajectory, in each of us, our trajectory moving forward? And how did you find your mentors? Are any of your mentors younger? Are any of your mentors to the younger generation? I'm not sure. I don't think I read that question correctly.
Are any
Let's
of
talk
you,
about who
any
got
of
us.
you mentors? Are we, yeah, do we have mentors, and are we mentors to other people?
Okay, there we go. Thanks.
I'm gonna let Dexter start because Dexter is part of this conversation, even though he's our director of operations for the morning.
Oh, wow. Yes. So let's see here. Mentorship. I think mentorship is definitely vitally important. I've had a number of mentors throughout the county, throughout religious organizations, throughout nonprofits that definitely have helped, steer me in the right path as a young man, as a millennial, as a minority male. And I think that it is very important that, we continue to develop mentorship. If you hear anybody speaking about anything now, the biggest thing that they're talking about is mentorship. And it is vitally, vitally important. Like what we are doing here today, we need the next generation, those students that are in 12th grade right now, going into their freshman year of college, to be able to have the same type of platform, the same type of level of engagement that we all are having today. And not just older mentorships, but everybody on this call is a mentor to me. They all bring so many different things to the table that I'm just sitting there like, why am I even connected? But I have the opportunity to learn from each and every individual that is on this call, and they are doing great things, from starting their own businesses to running campaigns, to being able to speak to groups of people. Just to have the ability to gather people together is a great skill set, which is needed in our time and especially in our community. I always look up to Jacob Dixon because he has built this huge building right around the corner from my house. And I'm just like, he's not even 40 years old. And he has built a building in Freeport that was owned by some other people that, could never happen. And he has been able to do that. And I mean, the building is standing, like it's not, a shack. It's a beautiful building. So I think, yes, we can find mentorship at every age level. And I think we should find it at every age level because young and old has something to offer. My grandmother used to say all the time, let the wheat and the tear grow together. It doesn't matter if it's good or if it's bad or if it's indifferent, we still got to grow together. And we can be our own individual persons, but let's grow together and affect change.
Yes. Who's
Kiana,
next?
you next?
No, I'm like, what do we say after that? I will say I've had like goodness, like we'll just throw it. I've had several mentors. Like I said, the first person that helped me even start Vision Street Research was Kelly Burton, who runs Nexus Research Group. She's in Atlanta, Black woman doing fabulous things. She also started her business when she was under 40. I've also, obtained mentors, I would say, like along the way in terms of like working in the county government. And similar to Dexter, I do agree, like each of you, I've learned something different from our relationship and the interactions that we've had. Definitely learned some different skill sets. So I'm glad that we have this caucus, as Dexter has named us. And we're able to, be on this forum. But and I feel like because of that, to whom much is given, much is expected, right? Like that's the quote that I love, as well as to pay it forward. So that is why, for me, internships and like workforce development, why it's so important, right? Kadisha Cox is on this because I believe it's important, right? Like I could have made it so she was an attendee, but no, she's part of my team. She's an intern, and I'm investing in her so that, she wants to run a nonprofit or a youth organization later on. She's back. So like, I want to be able to expose her to all you great people. And as part of our partnership between Vision Street and Choice for All, we host every Thursday and Friday what's called Snack and Chats, right? And it's exactly how it sounds. You're supposed to eat. People don't, I bring food, they bring food, we bring food. Our guest speakers didn't get the memo, but
I ain't eat.
Oh yeah, Kiana brought food. But the idea is it's 30 to 45 minutes for our interns to be able to be exposed to different professions, right? Just because we're in a pandemic doesn't mean learning stops, right? You should always be learning at any age. So we're able to have people come in. I mean, I learned stuff about Kiana I didn't know, right? And I'm friends with her during the snack chat.
Man, you speak at one event and you slip up. This is why you should always have a script.
But I mean, everybody that is on this forum has been part of the Snack and Chats to date, right? And each person was able to share something different with our interns, right? So I feel like we all are mentoring someone else, whether you know it or not. There's many times where people will tell you, will send you messages and you'll be like, I didn't realize I was influencing you like that, right? Like I was just being myself, right? So Dexter said, being true to yourself. So sometimes being true to yourself does become infectious, especially when I believe when you're doing positive things, right? When you're doing things that are for the community to help other people, it tends to be kind of infectious and people want to gravitate towards you. They want to learn from you. And I think it's just very important for us to kind of give back to our community and to young people in some capacity because somebody did it for us.
Mm-hmm. And I do, because I just got the memo, we have 4 minutes. I have not had a specific mentor from my industry. I haven't been able to learn directly from people about politics and campaigning. I really just kind of started working, and whenever I messed up, got fixed, I, bit that bullet and it was fine afterwards. As I started to develop myself more and start to get specific job offers, I started to learn how I didn't want to do things and learn how I could do certain things. So for my specific fields and industry, I take it very personally to make sure that I am accessible to those who want to get involved in government and politics, because specifically on Long Island, there are not too many, if any, Black women chiefs of staff, or there aren't too many Black staffers. These are, government is not always, government and politics is not always an industry that we in the community get directly involved in. We're all activists. We're all engaged to a certain extent, but there aren't too many of us actually working in those offices, which can be a detriment, because how can we build a better community that serves us if we don't know what we can change in that industry? So I have learned various tools from different women that I've had to find, and none of them from New York. Not too many of them are from New York, but I, of course, have always learned a great deal of things from my own family, from my own mother, from those who have supported me, from those that are on this call. So I've been very hands-on in my own learning, but it's been a great privilege to be able to help someone who wants to do what I do and not do it blindsided. So I'm always teaching. I'm always learning new things, and I'm always teaching new things. So.
Great. Jacob, Dan, can you give us 30 seconds of mentorship? Let's go with Jacob first, and then let's go to Dan. And then Dan, after your 30 seconds, can you also tell us about the 2 p.m. session? And then we're going to go right back to Erica to close us out.
Okay, so 30 seconds. Mentorship, yes, absolutely is important. One that I actually haven't never had a formal mentor per se, but organically have come into my life by design in some way, and I leave that to him, and that's just me, my personal perspective. But through that, whether it's through my parents, family, all the way down to folks from different perspectives, whether it's organizing, education. I've always had someone who, fortunately enough, has looked out for me and given me the pointers to go me in the right direction, but ultimately as well believed in my vision and what I wanted to do, because I came to this space authentic and saying I want to learn and I want to grow, and how can I be my best self to help others. And so when you have that mutual goal along one another and a mutual value point, I think you can see a lot of things happening. So mentorship is important. I look at Kadisha, for example, as one of the ones that, I saw her recently tagged us as mentors. And I was like, oh, yeah. And owning that role now in this space and figuring out how to make that happen. Our goal is just to impart this, because I think that intergenerational approach is so important for us to do that, and passing on the baton and knowing when it's right.
Amen to that. I've learned really quickly that you can't buy wisdom, and I'm always trying to figure out how to navigate life, because tomorrow's not promised, right? So, but it took me almost 30 years to realize that my mentor was my father. I kind of resisted that for a long time, and so now I'm walking in that. I'm very blessed, and that is definitely by far the mentor that has the most impact and value in my life. I would also say to those that don't have a mentor to kind of try to get a handle on your why and who you are, because once you can figure that out, a mentor will actually be drawn to you. It's like a magnetic, once they see that you're working and you're doing things and you really have self-confidence, not ego, into your purpose, that'll kind of like mutually happen naturally. So that's a beautiful thing. I've definitely been investing into the next generation. I mentor at a couple of elementary schools throughout the week. I actually do work at a youth center as well, part-time, so I'm always working with the young kids. I also am a co-founder of a basketball league, so basketball is my passion, and so we're constantly always talking to young kids. And mentorship isn't always maybe meeting with somebody on a weekly or monthly basis. It could just be really listening for 20 minutes and sharing something that really changes that young person's life. So there's a few different definitions to mentorship. And to close off with the 2 o'clock call, we're super excited. It's kind of happened, out of nowhere almost. And so a little nervous, I'll be very honest, but we're going to be having a conversation with the Attorney General, Letitia James, about the COVID-19 impact on minorities and millennials on Long Island, and correlating that into what we've been talking about, Jacob and Erica and everyone here, is how do we move forward? How do we transition from a negative into a positive, and then engineer and design what Long Island looks like for minority communities moving forward. So that's at 2 o'clock. All you got to do is go on to newsday.com and it'll be on their page live.
Thank you to all of our panelists, Kiana, Jacob, Daniel, Kadisha, for making this launch a great success. I'm so grateful. We still have over 20 people that are still on with us. And without further ado, we are going to turn this over to the CEO, the principal of Vision Street Research.
Yay!
Thank you all. This has been an amazing conversation and just experience. I've been looking at the comments in the chat. People are definitely fired up and wanting, the conversation to continue offline. Someone is asking, is the COVID survey on Long Island just for Long Island, or is it for the for New York City? So someone will address that. We do have people that are monitoring the chat. But just to go back to, so Vision Street Research is really about working with communities, governments, and small businesses to make positive impacts in our communities, right? The main services, as the commercial showed, are around project management, event marketing, market research. So the survey is definitely in my wheelhouse. I have a bachelor's degree in marketing and worked for a marketing research firm fresh out of college who, was a Black male that ran that organization, as well as workforce development. So one piece of it is definitely the census. The other part is really about career coaching and career exploration. One of the things that I really learned from, first, I would say my father, who ran his own business while working for several different, like Department of Environmental Protection. He worked for Con Edison. He worked for a lot of different New York City agencies, but he always had Norman L. Hill and Sons electrical contracting business. And one of the things that I really admired about my father is that he always mentored young boys, particularly, right? And he was really running his own vocational apprenticeship program ad hoc, right? On his truck. Like he would go to customers' houses and people would say oh, can you take my son on the truck with you? So my brothers, my god brother, several young boys now have a skill that they can use to earn money and take care of their families, right? And because college is not for everybody.
Right.
And that's just a fact. So there's no need to force or push people to go to college if that's not really their thing. But being able to give, to help what they call dislocated workers or at-risk youth be able to see another path, right? That you don't have to be in those low-paying hourly jobs that Daniel mentioned, that you can get a position that actually has a career pathway, right? It's not a job, not some hourly thing that just kind of keeps you in a rut. It's a true career pathway that has steps where you can start out at entry level and be able to progress and be able to get professional development and coaching and mentorship and all those great skills. And my firm is able to help with that. We can help with resume writing. We can help point you in the right direction in terms of the career one-stop shop services, things that are open, that are made available on those websites, and to do skills and interest assessments to figure out where you should go next. So, our website is live. You can find us at visionstreetresearch.com. Again, it is visionstreetresearch.com, all spelled out. If you go to the site now, you can also register for Daniel's event. It is under the events tab. You can click on the link. It'll take you right to his website as well to register for the 2 p.m. event. Also a proud member of the Baldwin Chamber of Commerce. I think the chambers of commerce are things that all businesses need to be involved in to have our voices heard, particularly as Black businesses. We need to make sure that we're present and there. And I'm definitely looking forward to being able to help with membership with the Baldwin Chamber of Commerce. And, obviously, last but not least, I'm so proud to be a member of the U.S. Coalition of Black Women Businesses, right? An organization committed to helping Black women businesses thrive. And they've been very supportive of me with this effort. And I just look forward to staying connected and continuing this conversation. The time is now. So the time is now to complete the census, my 2020 census.gov. The time is now to get more actively involved. Make sure you're registered to vote. Make sure you're voting in these local elections. The time is now for us to advocate and be a part of the change we want to see in our communities. So I thank you so very much for participating in this conversation. And I look forward to you being involved with us later on.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. You can follow us on Instagram at Vision Street Res New York, or on Twitter at Vision Street Res, so it's RES. And then I'm on Instagram and Twitter at I'm I am Erica Elizabeth. And we'll definitely be sending out a follow-up email. It'll have everybody on this call's contact information as well as their social media handles so you can stay connected, because our conversation doesn't stop here. It will continue happening, and we'd love to have you participate with us. So have a great rest of the afternoon. Enjoy the weather. Be safe. Wear a mask. Please wear a mask. The mask is for other people, for the record.
Yeah.
Everybody outside not wearing a mask, exposing me to COVID.
Right?
Thank you to the panel and to our great MC for the day, Dexter, to Khadisha for all the live tweeting and posting. You guys are amazing, and I can't wait for us to do this again soon.
Yes.
Hopefully in person.
Have a great afternoon. Bye, everyone.
Bless.
Bye.
Bye.